Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The storm of the century, Hurricane Milton, is just hours from making landfall in Florida, and officials say deaths are unavoidable. Multiple tornado warnings are in place as it brings high winds and a storm surge.
I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions as we head to the next 24 hours. It's literally a matter of life and death.
Millions flee, but as the evacuation window closes, those left behind are told to take shelter.
Also tonight on Sky News at 10, we're live in Jerusalem as the defense minister here warns its response to Iran will be lethal and surprising. Benjamin Netanyahu holds a call with Joe Biden to discuss Israel's plan to retaliate to the Iranian missile attack last week. And fears that southern Lebanon could become another Gaza, scores of rockets continue to be launched across the Israeli-Lebanese border.
Also coming up, gasps in Westminster as James Cleverly is knocked out of the Conservative leadership race, leaving Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. And Sky News can reveal that the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper attended Taylor Swift's concert in London for free, using tickets provided to her husband. Also tonight, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. The US President Joe Biden has described the situation in Florida tonight as a matter of life or death. Hurricane Milton is closing in on the US state and is expected to be one of the most devastating storms in history. And here it is. These are the images taken from the International Space Station earlier on today, and they show the scale of the hurricane that is now a Category 4 storm. It's expected to have winds of up to 180 miles per hour when it hits mainland Florida, and that's expected to be between Tampa Bay and Fort Myers. Our US correspondent James Matthews is in Tampa, which is in Milton's path.
Tornadoes are appearing on the horizon here. It's the precursor to the hurricane, and it isn't pretty. We're past the calm before the storm. It's closer than that. Wind and rain are blowing through west central Florida. This was the picture in Tampa. There will be more of this, much more.
Winds will be fierce at well over 100 miles per hour, with storm surges reaching up to 15 feet and up to 18 inches of rain. It's looking like the storm of the century. I know it's really tough leaving behind your home, your belongings, everything you own. But I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions as we head to the next 24 hours. It's literally a matter of life and death.
These are the latest pictures from NASA tracking the hurricane's path. Where it hits is the ominous uncertainty.
This is my piece of paradise.
Nick Hollings is a British resident of Sarasota.
This is obviously down the street. There's my buddy's truck there. So you can see we've just boarded up the house out the front.
Life on the edge of an evacuation zone is life on the edge.
Just to see all these lovely places that I've been going to for so many years at risk of just being washed away is just heartbreaking, to be honest.
Landfall of this hurricane is still several hours away, but already you get a sense of its power with roaring wind and driving rain. From these empty streets, it's clear people have heeded the warnings to evacuate. Right now, downtown Tampa is ghost town Tampa. Hi, Dan. How are you doing? In Tampa Bay, we found one man who's ignoring the warnings. Joseph Malinowski goes by Lieutenant Dan on TikTok. He's going nowhere, hurricane or not.
The plan is to sit down, and hunker down. I'm gonna be fine. I mean, this is a boat. It's meant to be on water, and the water's gonna surge. It's not a tsunami. It's not gonna come in and come over the side and capsize my boat.
It's a measure of optimism in the shadow of the hurricane. Under darkening skies, it's thin on the ground.
In Tampa, Florida now. And James, the picture tells us everything.
Yeah, hi Matt, how are you doing? This is Tampa indeed. And, look around, look at this rain, which has been relentless now. The wind has started to roar through Tampa. This is some of the early storm surge, I suppose, and this tells the story in microcosm of the danger that lies ahead. We are in a low-lying area when 9 feet, that's the current prediction, 9 feet of a storm surge comes ashore, then the danger is not just on the shoreline of flooding, but as that water travels inland, there is the danger that people will be trapped. That's why they have had evacuation zones, and that's why many people have left Florida for their own safety, a matter of life and death, as we heard from President Biden. And the warnings have been stark from the White House down. The challenge for the authorities is trying to get it through, frankly, to Floridians who have become used to hurricanes, used to hurricane warnings, sitting them out and surviving. The clear message to people is that it's different this time. Look at the numbers, the wind speeds of up to 180 miles an hour. It's currently tracking at 120 miles an hour. And look at the possibilities of that storm surge, 9 feet, as I say. Currently, Hurricane Milton is tracking towards Tampa. That is a particular concern because it's a built-up urban area with a population of 400,000. In terms of evacuations, the message from the authorities now is if you have not left Florida, then stay where you are, rest in place. But it will be a tough night. This hurricane due to make landfall in the early hours of the morning, something like 6-7 hours away. And speaking to medical staff, speaking to those who are in charge of resources, the one thing they tell me and have told people here is that we have the resources, we have search and rescue capability, but that won't take place during the hurricane. When the hurricane hits, you are on your own. It's in the aftermath that the recovery operation kicks in. Surviving the hurricane is down to the individuals, wherever they may be.
James, thank you very much, and do stay safe, of course. Well, we can bring you some other images from Florida now. We're going to look at Fort Myers. You can see what's happening with the trees there. The winds are really picking up. Let's have a look at Tampa as well. That's where James is, and we can see another view of Tampa there across the Gulf of Mexico too. And also Naples in Florida is expected to be hit by Hurricane Milton in the next few hours. You can see the sea is there just starting to pick up and looking rather rough. Well, scientists and meteorologists say the data emerging from Milton has been both remarkable and worrying as well, particularly how fast it's strengthened over abnormally warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark explains the factors that make this an especially dangerous storm.
Any storm bearing down on tens of millions of people is potentially catastrophic, but there are things about Hurricane Milton that have shocked experts. The first, how rapidly it grew or intensified. In just 16 hours, Milton went from a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane. Then things accelerated. It went from Category 1 to the highest Category 5 in less than 24 hours, making it the third fastest intensifying hurricane on record. And it's what's driving this intensification that concerns experts, the temperature of the ocean. This is the average sea surface temperature in the Gulf of Mexico. This year, temperatures have trended a degree or more above that.
Scientist who studies climate change, who knows that the kinds of things we're seeing with Milton or with Helene, with how quickly they intensify, with the potential to produce really intense storm surges that are made worse by sea levels that are getting higher as we warm the planet. I think, it really is concerning from a climate change perspective as well.
And you heard it there, the danger of hurricanes is not just about wind speeds, it's how they pile water onto land as a storm surge. Milton will continue weakening as it approaches land, but it's headed for the centre of Florida's west coast, with Tampa here its most populated part, making the risk of a deadly storm surge very real. This area in purple is a 150-mile-long stretch of coast where a surge is forecast to be up to 4.5 metres. Now, for context, I'm less than 2 metres tall. That's water beyond the height and the bounds of our virtual studio right up there, more than enough to swamp a single-storey home. So the repeated warnings to residents are not precautionary. The scale of casualties from Hurricane Milton depend very much on how many people choose to get well out of the way.
Good evening from Jerusalem. Well, after last week's attack by Iran on Israel, the world has been waiting to see what the retaliation might look like. The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said Israel's response will be lethal, precise and surprising. Today, the Israeli Prime Minister spoke with the US President. Historically close allies, it was the first time Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden have spoken since August. The White House said the president affirmed his ironclad commitment to Israel's security, but emphasized the need for a diplomatic arrangement to safely return both Lebanese and Israeli civilians to their homes. Well, Israel continues to be at war on a number of fronts. In Gaza, at least 45 people have been killed in a day in operations in Jabalia. Local medics say 3 hospitals in northern Gaza have become almost inaccessible because of the fighting. The Israeli military issued an evacuation order for the northern part of the Strip over the weekend, but UNRWA says 400,000 people are still trapped in the area. Meanwhile, Israel continues airstrikes into Lebanon, killing 4 people in a hotel that was sheltering displaced people. It's warned people to evacuate dozens of cities and towns across southern Lebanon, many of them north of a buffer zone declared by the United Nations after the last war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. Hezbollah militants have been hitting back as well. 2 people in Kiryat Shmona were killed in a strike earlier today, while the northern city of Haifa has seen rocket attacks over the past few days, the IDF claiming 180 rockets have been launched across the border. A warning that this report by Sky's international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has images of people who have died in Gaza.
Israel is now warning Lebanon it could become another Gaza. And from these drone pictures of one Lebanese village, that is already happening in places that Israel's invaded. Israel's cross-border incursions haven't stopped Hezbollah's attacks, though, launching scores of rockets at the north of Israel every day, most intercepted by air defences, but some getting through. One came crashing through this roof, the explosion blasting in windows and peppering apartments above with shrapnel. Terrifying for brother and sister Valeria and Vladi, who reached their shelter just in time.
We heard an insane bang that it felt like you knew it hit our building, so we're very
Everything
near.
was shaking.
It was very shaking. The whole building was shaking crazy.
The sound of glass shattering.
And we felt the whole building collapse and just the safe room stayed in place. That's how it felt.
Across the north of Israel today, missile attacks killed 2 Israeli civilians and injured several others. While Hezbollah is still able to fire its missiles this far south into Israel, the prospect of Israeli civilians returning to their homes further north of here seems remote, and Hezbollah has hidden thousands of missiles right across Lebanon, many of them a long way away from the areas that Israel is currently invading. The region is braced, though, for Israel's retaliation to this, Iran's assault on Israel with 200 ballistic missiles last week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discussed his plans with US President Joe Biden by phone today before his defense minister issued this warning to Tehran.
The accuracy at the various points of our attacks is very, very focused. The ability to attack is very strong. And as we have done so far in the war, in all other fronts, those who attack us will be hurt and will pay a price. Our attack will be lethal, precise, and above all, surprising. They will not understand what happened and how it happened. They will see the results.
The war that began in Gaza could still engulf the region in something even bigger. The conflict there has reached another awful milestone, its death toll reaching 42,000. Among the most recent to be killed, one of the youngest. 11-month-old Hossam al-Haldi, killed in an Israeli airstrike. At least 9 died, including 2 children in the area of Jabalia, where Israelis launched their 3rd ground offensive in a year. While Israel plots its next moves on other fronts, its war in Gaza seems stuck on repeat. Its people caught in a relentless cycle of anguish. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, in Haifa, northern Israel.
Well, let's bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who joins me live now from Beirut. And Alex, we're just seeing there the devastation in Gaza in Dominic's piece. And we're also seeing very similar things taking place in Lebanon, although global leaders are trying to say they do not want to see Lebanon turn into another Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, I think internationally, in terms of the diplomacy, there's a great deal of frustration, anguish, but also fear at what could come next in this spiralling regional crisis. We know that tonight or earlier this evening, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with the President Joe Biden of America. This is the first time, remember, this is the first time the two men have spoken together since late August, which gives you an idea of just how fractious the relationship is, but also perhaps how little leverage the United States now has on Israel and the course that it is set on. Now, they said the conversation, this is the White House, was constructive and it was direct. You can pass the words which way you want to interpret what exactly direct means. But I think the focus of the conversation will have been about shaping the Israeli response, the retaliation to the Iranian ballistic missile attack, which happened last week. We know the Israelis are going to strike back, but what the concern is in terms of what the US have is that it will lead to a greater spiral of escalation. Now, we don't, of course, know what it will be. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, gave us some idea. He said it will be a surprising attack. It will be precise. It will be pretty hard when it comes. It will also be technologically advance. But I think lots of people are watching that very, very closely and hoping it doesn't lead to yet another rung on the escalation ladder, which the Iranians will then retaliate from. And before you know it, you're locked in a ballistic war between the two sides, between Iran and Israel. But at the moment, things are looking pretty grim in this region, and they are heading in only one direction.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much for all of your analysis there. And just a bit of an announcement from me. The first episode of my new podcast, The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, is available now. Scan the QR code on your screen to start downloading. As always, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And as Alex was saying there, it is an incredibly grim and dangerous moment for this region, a waiting game as we try and wait and see what the Israelis will do next after Iran launched almost 200 ballistic missiles on this country last week. And as we heard from Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, it will be lethal, it will be precise, and it will be surprising. But we also know that this nation is already in turmoil. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says they're fighting wars on 7 multiple fronts. An incredibly tense time across this region in Gaza and in Lebanon as well, where we have seen a fifth of the population displaced. We will continue to follow all of the developments here in the region in the coming days. But for now, back to you, Matt, in the studio.
Yalda in Israel for us this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there was shock in Westminster today when James Cleverly, briefly the favourite to become the leader of the Conservative Party, was knocked out of the race. Kemi Badnoch and Robert Jenrick received the most votes from members, meaning it will be one of them who takes the helm in November. Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, has the story.
This the moment and a massive upset.
Kemi Badnoch, 42 votes. James Cleverly, 37 votes. And Robert Jenrick, 41 votes.
Audible gasps from MPs as James Cleverly, who had looked set for the final, is knocked out of the Tory leadership race. Conservative MPs voted instead for a Kemi Badenoch-Robert Jenrick runoff. Cleverly's backers can barely believe it.
I mean, I'm still slightly in a state of disappointed shock. I'd signed James's nomination paper. I had encouraged him to stand. I was firmly behind him. So I'm very disappointed.
Shock because Cleverly had become the front-runner after a successful party conference. But now the last centrist stand-in's been knocked out. The next leader of the party will come from the right. Badenoch now in pole position once more.
It is time to go bold. Just because you're not a first preference doesn't mean that people don't want you. And I think that that is what has happened throughout the contest. You could say that about any candidate. People have relationships, people have friends, they have constituency neighbours. These things feed into the MP stage of the contest. What matters now is what our members think.
Her rival Robert Jenrick less popular with party members, but he's hoping his hardline immigration stance wins out.
I want the party to once again occupy the common ground of British politics, which means fixing our NHS, finding ways to grow our economy, and yes, to secure our borders and control and reduce immigration. On each of these areas, I've got a real plan.
There is disbelief around here that James Cleverly has been knocked out of the race after being ahead. Absolutely brutal is how one of his supporters put it to me. So what went wrong? Well, it seems that some of his supporters, so certain their man would make the final two, decided to shift their votes to try and stop Badenoch or Jenrick, and in doing so killed off their own candidates. The Conservative Party will now be run by a right-winger, and that's leaving Labour MPs rubbing their hands in glee. This result could help the Tories fend off the threat of reform to the right, but the party needs a lot more than that to even be in the run-in at the next general election. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Sky News can reveal this evening that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, attended one of Taylor Swift's concerts in London for free using tickets provided to her husband, Ed Balls. We can get more on this now with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Tell us more, Sam.
That's right, Matt. So Sky News can reveal that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who works in the building behind me, attended a Taylor Swift concert as a freebie on August the 16th. Now, that's a freebie that we had no idea about at all until this evening when Sky News revealed it. We also know that those tickets were paid for by Taylor Swift's music label, Universal Music. Now, the tickets were given to her husband, Ed Balls, and he got 4 tickets, and one of those went to Yvette Cooper, his wife, who then duly attended. But we also know, courtesy of The Sun this morning, that just a few days before that gig, Yvette Cooper had weighed into an argument, unusually, with Scotland Yard, with the Metropolitan Police, to try and bolster the security for Taylor Swift in the aftermath of the foiled Vienna terror attack on Taylor Swift concert. She was threatening to cancel the concert if she didn't get more security. The police thought that was too expensive and not necessary. Yvette Cooper weighed in and said, I think you need to do it. And the extra protection was duly provided. So we know that that happened. So the question is, given all of that, could be a perception of a conflict of interest because of the involvement of Taylor Swift's music company and the Home Secretary wading in. The Home Office would deny that. But we don't appear to have known anything about this until tonight. Now, when speaking to allies of Yvette Cooper, they sound frustrated. They tried to declare this, but say that the ticket was only worth £170, below the threshold that needed to be declared, and they actually reported it to the Cabinet Office today. But the bottom line is that on August the 4th, Ed Balls was offered the tickets and presumably told his wife that she was going. Then Yvette Cooper weighed in to make sure that the gig went ahead, and on August the 16th, she went with her husband to enjoy that as a freebie, and we had no idea about any of that until tonight. No wonder there are questions being asked by the Tories.
No wonder indeed. Sam, thank you very much. There was a sombre reminder today of the time pressures in assuring justice and redress for the victims of the Horizon IT scandal. The Post Office inquiry heard that former sub-postmaster Gillian Blakey died last week before receiving her final compensation. That news was announced during the first day of evidence by the outgoing Post Office boss Nick Reed, who told Sky News he doesn't feel he has to clear his name. A warning, this report from our business correspondent Adele Robinson contains some flash photography.
Is this your last chance to clear your name?
I'm not really sure. I've got to clear my name.
But for the outgoing Post Office chief executive, 3 days of evidence brings difficult questions. £780,000 not enough, Mr. Reed? Accusations Nick Reed was obsessed with getting a pay rise.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Now sit uncomfortably next to this announcement as another sub-postmistress passes away.
My understanding is that Mrs. Blakely had not received the additional compensation to which she was entitled under the GLO scheme. That must be a matter of great regret for all concerned.
Following that sobering start, Mr. Reed, who joined the Post Office in 2019, told the inquiry he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
I didn't have experience of managing a litigation. I didn't have experience of running a compensation scheme, or indeed of managing a public inquiry.
Would you agree that this description is of a leadership team in 2019 that was living in something of a dream world?
I think it'd be impossible not to conclude that.
He plays the corporate game. He's quite good at it.
Watching was Sally, who paid back tens of thousands of pounds because of the faulty Horizon system. During Nick Reed's leadership, she and many others still haven't received redress.
He's part of the same mismanaged culture that's within the Post Office, and it's been there for a long time. There are some postmasters that are dying. Some have got cancer diagnosis in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I want to be able to see sunlight at the end of a dark, dark tunnel.
But the shadow hanging over the inquiry on day one of Mr. Reed's evidence was Jill Blakey's death, another sub-postmistress who ran out of time.
My condolences go to Mrs. Blakely's family. It's a very, very sad situation.
Will it make you consider speeding up the compensation processes that the Post Office is control of or looking after?
I appreciate I'm in the middle of giving evidence, so I'll pass on that.
But Nick Reed will have to answer eventually, with 2 more days of evidence looming. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Middlesbrough saw some of the worst of the riots over the summer, and 2 months on, people are still living fearful behind boarded-up windows. They say the violence was the final straw, and it's changed their lives immeasurably. They spoke to Sky's Shingi Mararike.
These terraced houses run through one of the country's most deprived communities. One street in Middlesbrough paints an entirely different reality to the establishment it shares a name with. This is Parliament Road. The violence that swept the country this summer found its way here. What was advertised as a peaceful pro-British march starting at the Cenotaph became a riot, focused on one of Middlesbrough's most diverse areas, with groups targeting homes and livelihoods.
Through the window!
People here are reflecting not just on those scenes, but social issues that existed long before. Parvaz understands the problems faced in this postcode more than most. He's had his phone shop robbed so many times, he's taken drastic measures.
I just put the shop for sale now. I'm not give up. But it's not 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, you know what I mean? It's so many times I'd give up.
His discontent only deepened this summer when this happened during the riots.
So they climbed on top of your car and started jumping on it?
Look, this guy broke the windows, you see?
Happening, what we can see.
Yeah, look, this is my car outside my house. One guy, second guy, look. Third guy.
Where were you when this was happening?
I was inside.
So you saw it?
Yeah.
What happened this summer is still evident here, with residents uncertain about when repairs will be made. The house John lives in was targeted that day. The windows still boarded up months later.
Whew. Once that is not the original state, for sure, it will frustrate me, you know. But I have hope in the police department that once they said it's going to be fixed, it will be fixed. So.
This is a diverse community relying on vital services. Streets Ahead are a charity who put on a low-price food shop for residents. Every time they open their doors, they're busy here. The people who run this service believe beyond any damage left by rioting, they can see a deeper disrepair with other issues that also need to be looked at.
We can fix windows, we can fix cars, we can do that, but fixing people's state of mind is a completely different thing. We need to get the hospital sorted out. We need to take care of poverty in these areas, we need to take care of health in these areas. It's a much wider range of things than people actually imagine it could ever be.
Beneath one day of disorder are more complex issues. There are cracks in this community, and repairing those will take some time. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Middlesbrough.
Now, the US election may be just under a month away, but as of today, voters are able to cast their ballots early at polling stations in Arizona. It's one of a handful of states where the election on the 5th of November will be decided. Our data and forensics correspondent has been examining what makes these swing states and their counties crucial.
Less than a month to go. Looks like we've had all the debates we're going to have. So what are the polls looking like? Well, this is the Sky News poll tracker, and we're interested in the gap here. That is a 2.7-point lead for Harris. And it looks fairly sustained, fairly entrenched. She's also edging up towards 50% of the vote. So that is useful, but it's not enough to win this, obviously, because it's all about this, the race to 270 electoral votes. Now, we've talked about swing states before. Here they are in grey all over the country. But we're going to go one better than swing states and talk instead about swing counties. Now, there are 3,000 counties in the USA, more than 3,000, but we've picked out 7 our data team. We're going to talk about 2 of them today and where they might decide the race, or at least give us an indication of where it's going. So let's go down to Arizona, that swing state, and we're going to go to Maricopa County, the city of Phoenix in the middle of that. And what's interesting about this is there are so many votes here. 62% of all the votes available in Arizona are coming out of Maricopa County. So it's important in and of itself. It's also been important in presidential races. You can see that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. And then 4 years later, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, and he took that county. Really, really important. And it's interesting in terms of what that county actually looks like in terms of the people who live in it. This is the demographic makeup of the county. You're comparing it to the state and also the US, so right down the middle here. That's like average for the US. Anything further to the right is a high proportion. So if you look at this, Hispanic, Latino population, really high proportion there, and also weekly wages. It's one of the highest earning places in the US. What that means, it's a confluence of factors. Hard to say, for instance, the Hispanic Latino population, traditionally Democrat, but Donald Trump has proved that he can pick up the votes. He has done that over the years. So it's hard to say exactly how that translates, but there's so many votes here. Compare that to another swing county. It's really, really an opposite story. Pennsylvania, we've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. Let's go to Erie County over here. Now, there are not many votes here. In fact, there's only 2% of the entire votes available in Pennsylvania. But what it does seem to have is a big predictive power, not predictive, but whichever way Erie County goes is where Pennsylvania tends to go to. So Trump beat Clinton in 2016, and then again Biden won it back from Trump. Difference here of just 1,417 votes. That shows how small this county is and how small the margins in that county is. But if you're watching on election night, and if Erie County goes one way, that could be a crucial indication. But it does show the size of the task, really. This race to 270. You've got two very different places. Maricopa down here, Erie up in the north, and both candidates have to hit both because what they want is to get those electoral college votes. 11 in Arizona, but 19 in Pennsylvania. So again, that is why Erie County, Pennsylvania is going to be crucial to this whole race. So if you're watching and Erie County goes one way, that could be a really good sign of which way the whole presidency is going to go.
That was Tom Cheshire. Now, a 2-year-old European brown bear has undergone pioneering brain surgery in Kent. Boki had been suffering from seizures due to a build-up of fluid inside his skull. Sky News gained access to the operation, which took more than 3 hours, and Boki is now recovering at the Wildwood Trust near Canterbury. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by the Mirror's Associate Editor Kevin Maguire and the Telegraph's Deputy Comment Editor Annabel Denham. Among the stories we'll be talking about, this one on the front page of The Guardian. Its headline, PM's vow to end austerity. It's £25 billion of tax rises. Before we go to a break, we're going to go straight to the US. Joe Biden is speaking about the hurricane.
The western coast of Florida. Already we're seeing impacts from the storm, including significant winds and heavy rain. And there's also been frequent and widespread tornado warnings throughout the day. And they're continuing and expected to expand as Milton moves overland, including a few that have already touched down in South Florida. Currently, Milton is a Category 3 with wind speeds up to 120 miles per hour. But no one should be confused. It's still expected to be one of the most and worst destructive hurricanes to hit Florida in over a century. You know, both the heads of the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service made it very clear in conversations I've had with them earlier today. Milton still carries incredible destructiveness, can wipe out communities, can cause loss of life. Storm surge is still expected to be up to 13 feet. So I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to listen to local officials and follow all the safety instructions they give. At this point, evacuation is probably difficult. So I encourage people to look for safer shelter. Sometimes moving just a few miles can mean the difference between life and death. We've already approved emergency declarations for Florida. We have thousands of federal personnel on the ground. We've staged and are ready to go. We have 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water. At my direction, the Secretary of Defense, Austin, has pre-positioned search and rescue teams, helicopters, and high water speed vehicles as close to the storm as possible, so they're ready to conduct life-saving missions. And the administrator of FEMA will be on site tonight in Florida and in the state's Emergency Operations Center. Both Administrator Criswell and I will be in constant contact with state and local officials in the hours ahead. Once the storm hits, we're going to work with state officials to clear debris, restore power, and do it as fast as possible. The Army Corps of Engineers will pump out water and decrease flooding. We've already directed the Department of Defense to be ready to provide active duty service members to support Florida after the storm surge if Governor DeSantis requests the help, which I expect he might, just like we did in North Carolina. I have surged over 1,000 U.S. Coast Guard personnel to perform search and rescue missions and reopen the port of Tampa as soon as possible. Now, I want to reiterate a point I made clear earlier today to the folks who have been impacted by Helene. This impact, and will be now impacted by Milton. Over the last few weeks, there's been reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. It's undermining confidence in the people in Florida and incredible rescue and recovery work that has been undertaken. Literally, there are thousands of fellow Americans who are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's harmful to those who most need the help. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American, and there is simply no place for them, not now, not ever. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That is simply not true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true. Now, the claims are getting even more bizarre. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's got to stop. Let me close with this. As difficult as these days and weeks have been, we've seen incredible courage by so many of our fellow Americans. I want to thank all the first responders for running toward danger instead of away from it, for saving lives and making a difference. FEMA personnel risking their lives, climbing on hillsides to reach people who cut off by Helene. Army National Guard flying through the gale wind force that it's amazing what they're doing. Firefighters lifting collapsed wood and metal in an attempt to see if there are survivors, any survivors under the debris, risking their lives. Coast Guard teams rappelling from helicopters to rescue people and risking their own lives. And there are countless friends and neighbors who have sacrificed for the greater good. Volunteers leaving their own families behind to help search for someone else's family. Fellow Americans looking out for one another. That's America at its very best. That's who we are. So my final message tonight is to the people of Florida and all the impacted states. We've got your back. We've got your back. And Kamala and I will be there for as long as it takes to rescue, recover, and rebuild. May God bless you all, and may God protect those serving in the eye of this storm on behalf of our nation. Thank you.
Why do you think spreading misinformation? Why do you think former President Trump has sent testing kits to President Putin during the height of the pandemic? Do you have a comment, sir? Why do you think Trump
Speaking of un-American.
Why do you think Trump is spreading misinformation?
I don't know. I simply don't know. You can speculate, but I just find it. I know I've used the phrase more than I've used it ever in my whole career, un-American. It's un-American. It's not who the hell we are. What are they talking about?
Sir, have you considered calling him and asking him to stop doing that? To stop spreading this?
Oh, come on.
Mr. President, does Governor DeSantis need to take Vice President Harris's calls?
All I can tell you is I'm talking to Governor DeSantis. He's been very gracious. He's thanked me for all we've done. He knows what we're doing, and I think that's important.
Can you say that Florida has everything it needs for the storm? How was your call with Netanyahu today?
We didn't talk about the storm.
Thanks, everybody.
As President Biden leaving that press conference in the White House talking about Hurricane Milton, accusing people of spreading disinformation about the hurricane of being un-American. He certainly pointed the finger at Donald Trump as well, and a congressman who seemed to suggest that the government there was controlling the weather, which President Biden said was just plain stupid. It's going to be a Cat 3 hurricane as it makes a landfall, the president said, but the storm surge, which really is the deadly part, still means of waves of up to 13 feet high, according to President Joe Biden, and winds of 120 miles per hour. Let's head back to Tampa in Florida, and our correspondent, James, is there for us. James, how are things at the moment?
Hi, Matt. Well, they're getting worse. The rain is getting stronger. The flash flooding, and it's slight at this stage in the Tampa area, is steadily increasing. And, of course, the winds are coming in big style. You can see that in the trees behind me. And, you know, the hurricane is clearly on its way. You hear it. It's on its way. You hear it in the roar of the wind. Interesting, Biden making these remarks, not for the first time today. I mean, those sentiments were expressed in an earlier statement today. He's clearly trying to ram home this message that Donald Trump has been spreading misinformation. I mean, he sees the failure of Trump to stick to the truth on that, but he also sees the danger of being seen to fail himself when it comes to support and crisis management when surrounding not just Hurricane Milton, but this whole hurricane season. That's what Trump has been needling him about, making claims that are false with regard to disaster funds being diverted towards immigrant housing, Georgia governors refusing to engage with Joe Biden. You know, these are the claims of Trump that he has been referring to, calling them in that statement un-American. So these are the politics that run in parallel to this crisis, this natural disaster that is on its way to central Florida. Downgraded, as you heard, to Category 3, but the message from Biden, the message echoed throughout the chain of local authorities here is don't be fooled by talk of Category 3 and any kind of downgrading. This is a big one. It is the strongest storm to hit this part of the world in more than a century, and people should pay due heed to that. Interestingly, he said evacuation would be difficult. I can tell you the local authorities are telling people not to evacuate. If they haven't fled by now, stay in place. That's the advice on the ground, certainly.
James Matthews in Florida, thank you very much indeed. Well, it is now time to see what is making the headlines with the Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabelle Denham. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. On the front page of the Financial Times, the Prime Minister's refusal to rule out employer national insurance rises in this month's budget. The budget is also the focus for The Telegraph, which reports on a warning that the Chancellor would need to raise taxes by £25 billion to avoid a return to austerity. The Times also leads on the proposed increase, calling it a tax bomb threatening the country. The Guardian has the same story too, on the tax rise being required to meet the government's policy targets. On the Metro, the front page centres on the Tory leadership race, with just Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick left in the running. The Eye leads on the Employment Rights Bill, which it says could include a right to flexible working. But the Daily Mail says business owners are outraged by those new proposals. The Express writes that pensioners losing out on winter fuel payments will now be hit by a tax raid. Meanwhile, on the front page of The Sun, the Home Secretary declares she received free tickets to a Taylor Swift concert from the Star's music label. And the Daily Star suggests the colleagues making you cups of tea are in fact bagging themselves an extra 8 days holiday a year. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. We're joined by Kevin Maguire and Annabelle Denham right now. You can make me a cup of tea during the break, if that's all right with you. But let's get straight to the Metro, Kevin, and this idea that the Conservatives, because of who is left in the race to be leader, are veering to the right, they say.
Yes, the storm battering the Conservative Party. Probably this is the first free gift to Keir Starmer he doesn't have to register or worry about. It was an extraordinary result. I mean, I laughed. I think you probably gasped, Annabelle. That there was James Cleverly, the front runner yesterday, is now out, so it goes down to two right-wingers, I nearly called him Robert Generic, Robert Jenrick, I know, and Kemi Badenoch. Because he's moved from the left to the right of the Conservative Party. She's on the right, but probably the left winger now, or slightly in this competition. It's ludicrous. I don't think. I really think Labour feels it's kind of an early Christmas present. Because James Cleverly was such a good communicator.
Yes, but Annabelle, were they being a bit fast and loose with the numbers, thinking he had it in the bag, but actually lending votes, as the Times seems to suggest in its 6- and 7-page spread, that they were too cleverly by half, really?
It certainly does sound that way. As the Times is saying, the only knowable truth is that Conservative MPs are the most duplicitous and unpredictable electorate in the world. There may well have been skullduggery, tactical voting. In fact, it's impossible to conceive of the Conservative leadership contest without such activity going on behind the scenes. But it spectacularly backfired. Of course, after yesterday's vote, where we went from 4 to 3, seeing Tom Tugendhat be knocked out, James Cleverly was on 39 backers, and today he'd actually managed to lose 2, and that put him into third place with Kemi and Robert Generic going through. But really, if you take a step back and you look at this contest and the way in which it's unfolded, the extraordinary thing is that the defining votes have actually, on paper, gone exactly the way that you would have expected them to. So I think that most people after the July election would have imagined that the final 6 would be Priti Patel, who'd go out first, Mel Stride, who would go out second, then Tom, then James, leaving Rob and Kemi as the final 2, with Kemi ahead. And that's exactly how it's unfolded. But of course, over the course of that period, we've had, I think, the bookies having 3 favourites, and there's been many, many twists and turns.
Thank you for the moment. More papers coming next after the break.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda. Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham. Annabel, let's get straight back to the front pages. And the Telegraph talks of £25 billion that needs to be raised in taxes.
Yes, so it's 3 weeks to the budget, Rachel Reeves' maiden budget as our first female Chancellor. We've had months of speculation. Indeed, Labour have come under some criticism for leaving it so long after the general election to have their first fiscal statement. But here we have a warning from the Institute for Fiscal Studies that Rachel Reeves will need to raise taxes by as much as £25 billion in order to ensure that Britain does not return to austerity. And of course, the Labour government has been insistent that we won't be returning to the austerity years of the coalition government in a few years beyond. The trouble that they have is that they outlined around £9 billion of tax rises before the general election, indeed since, but the IFS telling us that they will need to have raise much more because Labour have spent money on things like very big pay increases for public sector workers. So the IFS is saying there are other ways that they could raise this money. Of course, there's been a lot of talk of Rachel Reeves rejigging the fiscal rules in order that she can borrow more. But ultimately, the reality, according to the IFS, is to avoid a return to austerity. There's going to be pain, and that's either going to be felt by taxpayers today or it'll be felt by taxpayers in future generations if we do indeed go down the borrowing route.
Or public services.
Yes, or companies, as it happens, Kevin, because if we look at the FT, they're talking about the way to raising a bit more cash is employers' national insurance contributions. I mean, you said it's 3 weeks to the budget. It feels like this one's been coming for an awfully long time, many, many weeks now. And this idea of not charging employees higher national insurance contributions, which, of course, the Conservatives cut a couple of times, but employers, this has been mentioned several times before, it looks like there's some meat on the bones of this one, Kevin.
Well, it seems like it's a runner, because at the moment, employers' pension contributions in your pension pot don't pay national insurance, which is 13.8%. It's not being cut by the Conservatives. And actually, I'm trying to remember if George Osborne put it up. Maybe he didn't, but I've got some distant memory. And of course, employers as well don't have a kind of free area. You know, you can now earn, is it £12,500 before you start paying national insurance? Or that's when you pay income tax. But employers pay it from the first pound they give you. But if it goes on to pensions,
at a lower rate, of course, it's graduated.
If it goes on pensions, yeah, you can raise money that way, but then it seems about 2 in 5 employers say then they'll cut pension contributions. There's no free money anywhere. Somebody has to pay.
I think that
it's whether it's fairer this way.
Yes.
The context here is very important because, of course, in the run-up to the general election, Keir Starmer was absolutely insistent that there was a triple tax lock and they wouldn't raise VAT, income tax or national insurance. Most people took that to mean employers and employees' national insurance. And indeed, it's ultimately...
No, I didn't.
They never specified. This to me looks a lot like sleight of hand, and we need to remember that ultimately it's the employees who pay the national insurance because it will be passed on to them.
Personal tax rather than company tax.
Yeah.
Anyway, looks like that one's coming
regardless. I took it to be employees, never employers. Yeah. And I was surprised the Conservatives didn't make more of that.
Well, you can carry on shooting that one over during the break because coming up next on Sky News at 11 with Hurricane Milton just hours away from hitting Florida. The American president, Joe Biden, warns of incredible destructiveness on the way. You can see some of these images, just how bad the weather is getting in the panhandle there as it heads in from the Gulf of Mexico. More on that coming your way after the break.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.